Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, April 21st, 2022, and today we're going to be taking a look at the state of New Hampshire and Maggie Hassan as the incumbent Democratic senator who looks like she might be in a bit of trouble when it comes down to our new Senate race coming up this November. Now, the election here is one that is extremely important for the balance of power. The Democratic Party is expecting to win this seat because it's required for them to retain their Senate majority. Looking at the last Senate election, I'm sure we all know exactly how close it was. The Democratic Party had a 50-50 majority, effectively giving them the majority only through Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, in that majority, it means that there is no room for error, and the Democratic Party is extremely aware of that. And looking at our current projection right now, the Republican Party is poised to win control of the United States Senate. So in the event that that does occur, the Democratic Party, of course, would want to be playing defense and trying to ensure that they're winning the maximum amount of seats as possible, given our national environment. And New Hampshire has been a state that I really haven't moved away from the Democratic column except for a few times. During a brief period of time, what we found was that there was a likely Republican characterization for the state of New Hampshire. You might disagree with me on this looking at it now, but back then that was right under the assumption that in just a few days, Chris Sununu was going to actually announce his bid for Senate. There was an announcement that he made, I think actually a few days after this exact projection, saying that he was no longer going to run for Senate. It was an announcement that definitely took everyone by surprise because it was the perfect opportunity. It was right after the Virginia gubernatorial race that he made this announcement where you were really expecting him to come out in full force and say, I'm going to double down on this Republican momentum. Instead, he decided to halt it. So following his announcement, it became more Democratic and has since remained in the lean Democratic column where it has been for practically the entirety of this prediction season. Now, the reason why this video is being made is not because I'm trying to rehash my points of the Democratic Party being ahead in New Hampshire, but rather a reevaluation and a reconsideration of where we stand right now looking at the state of New Hampshire. Because these are the closest numbers we have seen during this entire campaign. The New Hampshire Senate race for a very good period of time was a race that Maggie Hassan was up by some pretty considerable amounts. For instance, Doug Bolduc, who is the candidate here, who was only losing by about a percentage point, you can find that the University of New Hampshire did a poll earlier on that found Maggie Hassan up by 10 percentage points, with her at 51% of the vote. That was a very large lead, and people on the Democratic Party, in the Democratic Party, were very happy with these numbers because they were seeing it, from a state that went to the GOP in 2010, went to the Democrats in 2016, that could be a state that the Democratic Party could rely on for a pretty large victory in 2022. In addition to that, there were other polls that were released, I think maybe here with Chuck Smith, that showed that there was a resurrection. It might not necessarily be Chuck Smith. I don't want to be off about that. So we'll go ahead and actually check the poll itself because it does provide a bit of context. Before we get into the poll, actually, I do want to say that I went into the crosstabs and I went into the demographic breakdown and I wanted to make sure that this was an accurate representation of New Hampshire voters. Now, in the 2020 election, Joe Biden won about 52.7% of the vote. Donald Trump won 45.4%. If you take a look at the 2020 presidential vote breakdown, 45% for Trump, 52% for Biden. So you're talking about an exact replication of what we saw in the 2020 election, which means you're working in an electorate that was favorable to Biden, which means it might not necessarily be too good if the Democrats are down on one hand. So let's go ahead and take a look at the questions here. Don Bolduc, Chuck Morse, and Kevin Smith, not Chuck Smith. I was messing up the first names, wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting it wrong. But looking at the results here, St. Anselm College is a university in New Hampshire, I believe. They do polls routinely across the state. They're one of the few routine pollsters in the state. Looking at the original poll from back in January, and I don't know if this is January this year or January last year, but the number shows that Maggie Hassan is up 18 points against Kevin Smith. 18 percentage points. She's at 42%, he's at 24%. They returned back with a poll in March that shows her up only by 10%, but only up by 10% in a swing state is quite impressive for a Democratic senator. Now, the University of New Hampshire in these new polls definitely draws a stark contrast from the ones that we have seen from St. Anselm, but there are many certain races, for instance, with Don Bolduc, where there is a University of New Hampshire poll from earlier on that shows her with a larger lead from before. I mean, overall, what I have gathered from this, and I think what you should gather from this, is that New Hampshire is getting closer. And these numbers prove it. You're talking about an electorate that is the exact same that elected Joe Biden in 2020, that is now only voting for Maggie Hassan by 1 point, sometimes having her lose by 2 points against the state Senate Majority Leader. I mean, what you are finding is that Maggie Hassan is now this vulnerable Democrat as she always was, but you're finally starting to see the Republican Party's wishes come to fruition. Maggie Hassan is a strong candidate. If we want to do a little bit of electoral history, we can go back in time to her first election in the Senate race. And not actually her first election, but her most recent Senate election. 2016. Maggie Hassan ran against Kelly Ayotte, who 6 years prior won by, with over 60% of the vote. She got 60.1% of the vote to her Democratic opponent's 37%, won by 23 points. Now, granted, it was a red wave year. 2010 was an exceptional year for the GOP. They were winning all across the nation. They won in Pennsylvania. They won in Wisconsin. They won in Illinois. Even Illinois, right? Crazy to think about. Washington was down to 4 points. Colorado was down to a point. Nevada was down to 6 with the Senate majority leader at the time. California was down to a 10-point margin. California, of all states, right? Against Carly Fiorina, the 2016 Republican presidential contender. I mean, what you're looking is that across the nation, the Democratic Party was extremely vulnerable and lost many, many close races. Lost Florida by 19, lost Georgia by 19, or swing states, lost Ohio by 17, lost Iowa by 31, right? Lost Indiana by 15, lost Missouri by 14, lost Kentucky by 12, North Carolina by 12, Illinois by 2, Wisconsin by 5, Pennsylvania by 2. So the list goes on, and New Hampshire only solidifies that with a 23-point victory for Kelly Ayotte. So when it comes back to 2016, and you're seeing roughly the same exact states go red, right? Nearly every single state. I think there actually isn't any flips relative to 2010 besides Illinois. New Hampshire comes in. New Hampshire comes in and gives Maggie Hassan the victory by 0.14%. You take a look at that Senate race, take a look at the vote margin here. 1,017 votes. 1,017 votes. Now, of course, there was a consideration. Okay, maybe the numbers are off. So, going through the numbers again, Maggie Hassan still won her election. Maggie Hassan still won across the state of New Hampshire. And she served until now. So she comes in, defeating this electoral juggernaut, Kelly Ayotte, who is a statewide recognized name. And she enters into 2022, and she's expected to do well. Well, now it looks like there's a very real possibility that she loses. Now, one thing that Maggie Hassan can take into consideration is that in her last election, the polls overestimated the GOP. Kelly Ayotte was expected to win on average by 1.5% according to the numbers released here. In fact, Kelly Ayotte led for the majority of the campaign season. Leading right into the final stretch of the election, in the final 2-3 months, Kelly Ayotte had a lead across the state of New Hampshire, and it didn't look too good for Maggie Hassan. Surprisingly enough, this is one of the few races where the Democrats actually outperformed their polls, especially in 2016. Maybe she can relish in that fact that, she was expected to lose before and ended up winning. But you have to look at it from another angle. If you take a look at the 2020 election, Joe Biden was expected to win by more than 7.2%. You average the most recent polls here, what you will find is that Biden was up by around 10 points statewide. Ended up winning by 7.2, but a 3-point reduction when Maggie Hassan is only ahead by 1 isn't exactly something to look forward to. But then again, polls can also be weird in New Hampshire, where sometimes they can be spot on. In 2016, Donald Trump was expected to lose to Hillary Clinton by 0.3. How much did he lose by? 0.3. It's interesting to see how the polls can sometimes overestimate Democrats, underestimate Democrats, or sometimes be spot on. And Maggie Hassan has no way of knowing exactly what that means for her election this November. But looking at it from an outsider angle, looking at it from the standard, analytical point of view, this is not a good look for her. Because these undecideds will inevitably break down for the GOP. They will go and vote for them merely because Joe Biden is unpopular and Republicans are ahead nationwide. And I don't think that these numbers really come as a surprise looking at the generic ballot from 2020 versus where we are right now. The nation in 2020 was about polling Democrats +7 nationwide. Looking at the eventual vote, it ended up getting closer, but the point being, the generic congressional polled vote, considering the overestimation of Democratic Party vote share, you found that the Democratic Party was up about 7 points. Well, when the Republican Party is up by about 2 points, that's about a 9-point swing between the polls. So you can probably expect about a 9-point swing on that generic ballot, on the same generic ballot, on that same national environment that Biden won by 7.3%. A 9-point swing can definitely take a state that was 7.4%, 7.3%, and turn it into a state that has Republicans ahead by 2. It's merely just a mathematical, thing here where you're looking at the swing and it becomes more evident. Now, we don't know exactly who's going to be the 2022 Republican nominee based off of those who have announced and been in the race for such a significant period of time. I think there's actually the poll questions this exact race. Let's go ahead and see if we can find it here. But the point is that, looking at the primary polling, we don't know exactly who is going to win yet. Based off of the numbers, we can assume it's going to be Don Bolduc. I don't think that's going to be, too out of the question. He was the, longest announced name. He came in at a time where there was even a consideration that there was going to be potentially Chris Sununu or potentially Kelly Ayotte. It will be interesting to see, though. I'm surprised to see this, actually. Kelly Ayotte, it looks like she... interesting, because she was in the declined column before, but it looks like now she is no longer. The primary is set to occur sometime, September. Okay, so it looks like there's a bit of time for Kelly Ayotte to announce her bid, but the point being that based off of the candidates we have right now, Maggie Hassan really isn't doing super well. She was before, and props to her for that. But there is seemingly a more of an indication now that she is vulnerable, and she is vulnerable as every other Democrat likely is, right? Looking at our national environment, looking at where Joe Biden is, looking at where she is in the state, looking at where our generic ballot is, looking at just simply every other circumstance, it makes sense for New Hampshire to be competitive. It is one of the few swing states that has lasted a swing state for such a long period of time. I mean, you take a look at recent elections, right, and you'll find that New Hampshire is always one of those competitive states. Competitive in 2020, competitive in 2016, competitive in 2012, competitive in 2008, competitive 2004, 2000, even going back to 96, 92. Looking at 88, it wasn't. It was actually a pretty strong Republican stronghold. You were looking at Republicans almost routinely winning here, except for 64, and then it still remained with the GOP. Bill Clinton was that first Democrat in quite some time to win the state of New Hampshire, and he didn't do it by a lot. Came back in his re-election bid, won again. Then all of a sudden, Bush won it. Then Bush won it again. Kerry won it the second time, which was interesting because you saw a flip in New Mexico and Iowa. And then you go to 2008. Okay, Obama wins it by 9.6. Democrats are walking it back. But then 2012, Obama wins it by 5.6. And then Clinton only wins it by 0.3. Democrats might have had recent victories here, but it's still close. It is still very much competitive and has elected numerous Republicans in between and through all of these elections, midterms, presidential. Even in the most recent presidential election, you saw Chris Sununu win the most votes of any voter, of any candidate in the state of New Hampshire, and that was in the governor election, in which he won by, get this, over 30 percentage points. I mean, the governor election in the state of New Hampshire went to Chris Sununu by 32 points, an exceptional margin on the same ballot that the Democrats were winning the Senate race by 15, they were winning the presidential race by 7. So all around, this state, while does have a blue history and does have a blue trajectory, and the polls still show Maggie Hassan ahead, this is too close for comfort. And knowing anything about recent overestimations of of Democratic Party vote share, of recent underestimations of Republican candidates, Maggie Hassan is probably losing the race at this point in time. Now, I do think that she still has a very good shot at victory, and I think the factor of the incumbency is a very big thing. But based off of this poll alone, I could probably conclude that Republicans are slightly ahead in New Hampshire. But the good news about polls and the good news about data in general is that we can wait for more to come out and we can average it. I'm not going to base my entire electoral decision and electoral characterization of New Hampshire on just one poll. I think that would be naive to do. But I do think that we should take this into consideration because it is a poll from the University of New Hampshire. It's a state that doesn't frequently get a lot of polling data, especially right now. It's, I think, maybe easier or harder to poll the state, but generally you see the same reoccurring pollsters do it. So it might be interesting to wait maybe a month and see what more data is put out. But this is our first update here at over a month, and it does provide a bit more context about where the state is right now, and it sort of matches up with what we've been seeing on the nationwide level in terms of the statewide shifts that we've seen in terms of the way that certain races were previously Democratic races that are no longer there. And New Hampshire might be one of those states that joins in. Maggie Hassan is a strong candidate, but national environments are a lot stronger. She can resist the wave, but if it sweeps her off her feet, she's done, right? You're looking at a scenario where the red wave could turn into a red tsunami, where you could see Republicans winning back control of the House by large margins, winning back control of the Senate, and carrying New Hampshire with it. At one point in time, it was not out of the question for 54 seats to go to the GOP in 2022. And I think by November, it won't be out of the question either. There is always a possibility that Democrats do retain control of the Senate, but I can guarantee you it won't be easy. It will require Biden to rebound. It will require the generic ballot to rebound. The Republican Party is undoubtedly ahead right now, and I think New Hampshire, being one of those swing states, as it always is not out of the question to be one of those closer states or potentially Republican pickups for 2022. And I think this poll from the University of New Hampshire only confirms that belief. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.